25 years ago, very few people would even think this inspirational, soft-spoken, quiet China leader of 1.3 billion people would be the future president of China. In one of his speeches, governing a big country is as delicate as frying a tiny fish. China is 9.6 million square kilometers, 56 ethnic groups, several hundred million civil servants, making it almost impossible to cover them all effectively, and yet one must guard against drawing conclusions and making decisions based on partial information. We are, of course, talking about no other than President Xi Jinping of China.
Our prophet used to say, if you want to seek knowledge, you go even to China. And that's what the prophet said. Why China? Why not Sarawak? Because the civilization in China was that advanced. You know, the printing press was there in China. So technology is in China. So that's why the prophet encouraged people to seek knowledge in China. Even today, Sarawak also going to China. Our public transport, autonomous rapid system is from China. We bring to Sarawak. And we are working with Huawei in order to establish smart city.
China has exported the world's first hydrogen-powered smart tram to Malaysia. The tram, developed in China, is the first of its kind and uses a hydrogen energy power system. This groundbreaking smart tram was produced by CRRC Juzhou. The journey to export the smart tram started from its production site in Juzhou, located in central China's Hunan province. The tram will be shipped from the port of Shanghai to Malaysia. Once in Malaysia, it will be used for urban transport services in Kuching, the capital of Sarawak. The hydrogen-powered system in the tram offers advantages such as a longer driving range and shorter refueling time. It is also praised for its energy-saving and environmentally friendly features. The smart tram has undergone intelligent design upgrades to align with Malaysia's goal of achieving a zero-emission and intelligent public transport system. Upon arrival in Malaysia, the tram will undergo a 3-month testing period in Kuching.
Sarawak in Malaysia is one state placed in a rather awkward position of balancing its socio-economic growth with that of keeping in line with federal government sentiment. The One Belt, One Road concept is not entirely a new idea. It took on that name after the old Silk Road of 2,000 years ago, during the Han Dynasty. It was then the reality when China envoy named Zhang Xian was sent to Central Asia on several missions of friendship and trade. His journeys opened the door to friendly contacts and trade, and started the story of Silk Road linking East and West Asia and Europe.
Bueno, mire, por ahora esperamos en la visita al más alto nivel con el presidente Xi Jinping suscribir una serie de memorandos de entendimientos y acuerdos marcos, que eso nos permitirán abrir las puertas precisamente a todas estas posibilidades de proyectos de desarrollo.
And it says a lot about the Chinese leadership. When the going gets tough, the leader goes missing. What do you think was his response? He was not happy, of course. And he is said to have confided in his team. Turns out Xi Jinping blamed his predecessors for the problems. He blamed 3 men, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao. He blamed them for the issues that are plaguing China today. We have some quotes. This is what the Chinese president reportedly said. All the issues that were left by the previous three leaders are on my shoulders. I've spent the last decade tackling them, but they remain unresolved. Am I to blame? That's apparently Xi Jinping venting after being pulled up by the party elders. Then he told his team to fix these problems, especially the economy. You see, it's the lifeblood of the Communist Party. In a country where political and social freedoms are curtailed, economic growth is the bargain that the government offers.
His writings served as the foundation for Donald Trump's plan to get tough on China, and they continue to influence the Biden administration's China policy today. Back in 2019, Trump signed an executive order that blocked Chinese telecommunication companies like Huawei from selling equipment in the United States. Huawei was just the first step, and this ban was relatively easy to implement.
China's relationship with countries in the West, European countries, United States, Asia, Africa, Arab Gulf countries, Latin America, Central Asian countries, and rest of the world are comfortable and exemplary on one hand and left much to be desired on the other hand. The reactions of many countries on China's rapid economic growth and its foreign policies range from being friendly and cooperative, neutral, sometimes supportive, sometimes central, and thirdly, negative and toxic. Russia and Russian cultures and scholars are not unfamiliar to President Xi. He is said to enjoy reading works by Russian writers like Alexander Pushkin, Nicholas Gogol, Leo Tolstoy, and Anton Chekhov. President Putin and President Xi appear to have a certain chemistry which inspire their shared vision and common views for a multipolar world of our times.
China and the United States on an unstoppable collision course.
We want to break the historical cycle that a rising power and a ruling power usually resolves in conflict.
Strategic partners, strategic competitors, or strategic enemies. And what does it mean to you, to me, and to the rest of the world?
The speeches given by the different leaders of BRICS at the summit. I read through all of the speeches given by the main BRICS leaders and some of the speeches given by other leaders who attended the summit. I'm going to go through the main points and talk about why I think this is such an important economic and geopolitical development. Now, I think one of the most important things to stress here at the beginning is that this is a massive blow to the petrodollar system. What is that? Well, since the 1970s, the vast majority of the oil sold on the international market has been sold in dollars. If you look at the list of countries that are the top oil producers in the world, we can now see that BRICS Plus members represent more than 40% of oil production on Earth. This data comes directly from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, so you cannot accuse this data of being biased against the U.S. It's from the U.S. itself. Lula openly called for that, but it's still very much in the planning process.
From east to west, north to south, the BRIC countries have already broken new grounds for common good for all of their member countries. One of BRIC leaders said, "A single giant tree with myriad branches covering wide areas in the forest does not make it a forest." China's stand on solving international conflicts afflicting multi-countries is through UN fair intervention and solve them through political solutions. The UN, we all believe, should promote a clear-cut criteria of right and wrong.
I don't want to overemphasize it, but it does feel like we're living in a bit of a new world. And that's, of course, with the Saudi-Iran deal. I mean, this is a really, really big deal. It's been making headlines. Before we get into some more specifics, I just kind of want to hear your general thoughts. Why does this detente between Saudi Arabia and Iran matter? And how does this going to change what's taking place across the region?
Well, we have to go back a bit and remember that when General Soleimani was going to Iraq, he was going to visit the former Iraqi Prime Minister, Mr. Dr. Adel Abdul Mahdi. The Prime Minister at that time, he had received a letter from the Saudis about discussing or trying to find ways to de-escalate and eventually move towards some sort of accommodation and towards rapprochement. And obviously, the Americans did not want that to happen. The Americans have people everywhere in Iraq. They occupied the country for 2 decades. So they murdered him to block that rapprochement.
We are living through a new Cold War, Cold War II. And in the 21st century, one of the main ways that wars like this have been waged is through economic means. Economic warfare, also known as sanctions. Now, when sanctions are imposed unilaterally by a country without the support of the United Nations, they are referred to as unilateral coercive measures, and they are illegal according to international law. And 1/4 of the global population lives in countries that have been unilaterally sanctioned by the United States. The countries that are sanctioned by the US and Europe also represent nearly 1/3 of the global economy of world GDP. And the use of sanctions as a weapon of economic warfare by the United States and its European allies has skyrocketed in recent years. Pretty much every week, Washington announces a new round of sanctions against a foreign country. And among those countries sanctioned by the United States are 2 of the most powerful nations on Earth, China and Russia. In 2021, US President Joe Biden said that his goal is preventing China from becoming, quote, the wealthiest country in the world and the most powerful country in the world. That's not going to happen on my watch. But for big countries like China and Russia, yes, it does some economic damage, but it also in the medium to the long term helps them because they're now more economically sovereign and technologically sovereign.
United States imposition of punitive sanctions and without endorsement of United Nations and clearly supported by its loyal Western allies, force the issue on us all. Where should we stand? Do we support United States? Do we support China? On many divisive global issues in this very uncertain time.
Take this cooperation forward under the framework of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which, as you know, is the flagship and the pivot of the Belt and Road Initiative.
我们海南按照英亩收购，它是有30公分。
Yang tinggi, jenis yang sama. Lepas tu dia ada cakap tadi, dia kata pada kadar penurunan hujan. Macam di Hainan, hujan lebih lebat. Yang 1 ekar boleh dapat dalam sebab kalau betul dia cakap 30 tan 1 mol kali 6 bermakna 180 tan setahun ekar.
China leaders believe that as long as the 1.3 billion people have faith and rely closely on China's unique development path with China's characteristic, which have been proven over 1 generation to be beneficial to the people, they believe they will trump ahead. They believe in promoting friendship and cooperation through One Belt, One Road initiative. They are confident they can overcome all difficulties and obstacles and make new achievements and finally reach China's goal. This, they believe, they can do without the help of dissenting and unfriendly big world powers.
I mean, let's remember, the Philippines is a much smaller nation than China and doesn't really have a navy even close to what China has. So now they're in this impossible decision. They have to choose between giving up their sovereignty and fishing rights to their aggressive neighbor, China, or partnering with their former colonizer who also wants to repel China. And in this case, they chose the latter.
China has pushed too hard. It's pushed the Philippines in the South China Sea, what they call the West Philippine Sea.
The Philippines is planning to boost its military presence in the disputed South China Sea.
It started in 2014 when they allowed the US back in for the first time in 22 years. The US presence will technically be in bases that are owned by the Philippines, but the US can have troops, build barracks, and other military installations, and can have pre-positioned supplies there as well. It's basically like the US has bases there, but it's like, shh, it's actually the Philippines.
Mr. President, how concerned are you with the continued provocation in the South China Sea
from
China? How concerned are you with the continued provocation from China?
As concerned as you could possibly be. It is one of the major issues that we have to face back home.
If you believe cooperation with the Vice President and President Biden will get you closer to protecting the region?
Well, cooperation with the United States certainly is just something that we are building upon that has been going on for many, many, many decades. And we just keep going.
What preferably then be the trend of today's world? The answer is unequivocal. Should it be the trend of peace, friendship, cooperation, and mutually beneficial progress? But what about colonialism and hegemonism? Absolutely not, because they inevitably and eventually lead to dead end.
We are clear-eyed about the areas where we have fundamental disagreements with China, and I raise those issues when we meet. But I think it's important we also recognise that we have to have a pragmatic, sensible working relationship with China because of the issues that affect us all around the globe.
Yeah, and Scholz has spoken about de-risking from China. What does he mean by that, and will this be one of the topics of discussion?
Well, that's interesting. After the U.S. came up with the word decoupling from China, Scholz said, no, we don't want decoupling, we want de-risking. And that's also something the G7 leaders have adopted. And what it means exactly, we don't know at this stage. Does it mean that critical infrastructure can't be allowed into Germany anymore? I mean, Chinese investment in critical infrastructure, like what happened, for example, with the Hamburg port. Just a few months ago, China bought a big stake in the Hamburg port, and that was heavily criticized. Of course, Germany has this experience of being too dependent on Russia, at least.
On Thursday, King Salman signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement with Xi that, according to state media, included 34 deals for investment. One of the deals included Chinese tech giant Huawei, involving cloud computing and building high-tech complexes in Saudi cities. The agreement was struck despite U.S. security concerns over using the Chinese firm's technology amid Huawei's growing foray into the Gulf region.
Rekan-rekan media yang saya hormati, rekan-rekan, pertemuan bilateral utamanya membahas penguatan kerjasama ekonomi.
History is the best teacher. Why? Because it faithfully records the journey that every country has gone through and lessons for them to learn for the future. President Xi Jinping often drives home the importance of patriotism to young people in China. Why? Because patriotism has been the stirring theme and powerful force inspiring the 1.3 billion people of China. China also appears to maintain holistic view of China's national security with China characteristic by assuming the people's security as the ultimate goal and to regard economic security as their foundation. Yasan Pilla's 40th video will cover the shared dreams and new hopes of the leaders and people of BRICS and how the non-BRIC countries react to them.